and Brenda Hale. Are we aware of sorry, this rather spooky audio system?
We all sound like that.
Is there one other person unaccounted for?
David Michael.
David Michael, yeah. Oh, sure, okay. Okay, members, at page 20, we're going to have to do something with the sound, guys.
Even the desks are sounding.
Okay, at page 20, there's a call for evidence from the House of Lords Select Committee on the Constitution. They have an inquiry into intergovernmental relations between the United Kingdom and the devolved administrations. I have to say, members, I was invited to give evidence. I don't think I am up to that. This is not an issue that I think we have ever discussed in this committee, even though a lot of this falls to OFMdFM in terms of the North-South Ministerial Council, the British-Irish Council, the Joint Ministerial Committee. But they've asked for submissions in writing by 5 o'clock tomorrow. And then I say they're going into hearings. Would we be content if we write to make clear this is not something that we have looked at, even though it potentially would fall within our remit? Yeah.
You'll have to, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do we want to say that this is something we will be considering in the future?
I think that would be a good idea. As long as your finger.
Yeah. Yes. How long is our forward work programme? Okay, without committing ourselves to too much detail, yeah, okay. Next, page 24 of your packs, members, an invitation to the Policy Forum for Northern Ireland keynote seminar. This is on the future of the energy sector here, cost, supply and regulation. It's 17th of September, and would you please respond directly if you wish to attend. Page 29, you'll see a copy of an invitation from the Chairs Forum. It's dinner with the Minister of the Environment. It's on the 21st of this month in Derry/Londonderry. But the key topic is the opportunities of local government reorganisation and community planning. I think I am unable to go. Chris?
I don't think I'm available either, Chair, so apologies.
Any member?
Thanks, that.
21st of January?
Next week.
It's next Wednesday, so it'll be right after committee, because I think it's, from memory, it's like a 6 o'clock start. I think it's an early start. Well, look, could you liaise with the committee staff if anybody feels they'd like to go to that?
6 o'clock, you're right, Chair.
Thank you. Next, page 32, a request from Mae McLaughlin MLA in her capacity as Chair of the Assembly Community Connect grouping to participate in a speed networking event. It's on Monday the 26th. It's with a group of some 60 women from across Northern Ireland who are participating in Coromela's Stop Peace Unravelling programme. I've also been invited to give a short presentation on our inquiry into Together Building a United Community. So, two questions. Are you content that I make this presentation? And secondly, can you let committee staff know if you would like to take part in the speed networking?
What date was that?
That is the Monday the 26th. I think I went to the last Community Connect and it was very good, I have to say. Page 34, there's an invitation from Business in the Community. They have annual awards. It's Tuesday the 27th in Belfast, and it's a breakfast. And again, please respond directly. On to tabled papers, members, at page 6, there's notification of the launch of Deconstructing Legislation, a practical guide to legislative scrutiny by Daniel Greenberg, who's formerly a UK Parliamentary Consul. It's Tuesday the 27th again, and it's here in the Senate over lunchtime. Again, could I ask members to respond directly. And the same gentleman, Daniel Greenberg, through Politics Plus, he's hosted sessions with committees to assist with bill scrutiny, and it's proposed that a session will be arranged to assist us with our scrutiny of the Children's Bill. subject to its passing second stage, which is provisionally scheduled for the 26th of the month. So the session would give us an opportunity to discuss the provisions of the bill with Daniel and with a view to gaining more of a comprehensive understanding of the policy and the technical aspects of the bill, and just to tap basically into his expertise. There's further information on his work at page 7 of table paper. So are members content that we arrange this legislative scrutiny session with Mr. Greenberg? Okay. So that, members, I think will be on the 11th of February following a short committee meeting, and it probably will last a good hour and a half. But as I say, we are the scrutiny committee for Stephen Agnew's private members bill. And finally, in this section, members, a copy of current invitations is at page 35 of tabled, not of tabled, sorry, of your pack, 35 of your pack. Next, draft minutes of the meeting of the 10th of December 2014 begins at page 37 of your pack. Are we content to agree? Thank you. At page 51 is a list of outstanding correspondence. In the absence of any comment to that, can I refer you to the correspondence summary sheet on page 55? This is correspondence received since the last meeting. I will now ask the clerk to highlight items she believes we need to give some attention to, but you are, of course, at liberty to raise any matter of correspondence individually.
Thanks, Chair. There are a few items just to get some decisions on from members. The first one is the Human Rights Commission have sent in their annual report, annual Human Rights Statement 2014, and have indicated that they normally give a briefing to the committee on the report, and it's just to check if members wish to schedule a briefing at an appropriate time in the work programme. Okay, thanks. At page 58 in the pack, there's a response from the Community Relations Council to a query arising from the briefing on the 3rd of December, and it's just to check if members are content to include that in the evidence base for the inquiry. Then the Joint Ministerial Committee on the European Union, a report from the Junior Minister is at page 61 in the pack, and it includes issues that are relevant to other departments, so it's to seek agreement just to forward that on to the relevant statutory committees for information. And just to draw members' attention to an investment activity report, there's a new format, proposed format at page 80, 81 of the pack, and that's from November last year, and you could compare it to the old format at page 85, which is from December. Now, we have been asked to seek the committee's views on the new format and whether you wish to continue seeing it in the old format or the new format. It's just to see which you prefer. The new format does appear to be more visual.
Yeah, it's more pleasant on the eye, I was going to say, yes.
Yeah.
The wonderful RAG indicators.
So would you be content with the new format to continue seeing it in that way?
Sorry, is it in relation to the PFG reporting?
No, invest in activity.
All right,
Yep.
okay.
Have I left members? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, go with new.
And just to draw members' attention to an update from the Victims and Survivors Service at 101 in the pack, and there's a briefing scheduled on the 4th of March. The OFM have provided a response to the PFG briefing at 114 in the pack, and the department has advised that or provided a further breakdown in budget allocation for delivering social change and further information on TBUC. But has advised also that queries regarding the CRED board should be directed to the Department of Education. So first of all, I just want to ask if members are content to forward it to the Department of Education to respond to that query. And the second question is to ask if members are content to include that correspondence in the evidence base for the inquiry.
Yep.
And then to, if members could turn to page 6 of table papers, there's a report on progress against PFG commitments. This report will be made public from next Monday, the 19th of January, so it's just to provide to members for advance information at this point in time. Although, Christy, you have some.
No, I've had a glance at it, and there's good and bad. I have expressed concerns previously about how the OFMdFM on behalf of the executive reports back as to progress on the programme for government targets, and I think it's inadequate to do it via online report in this way. Some of the text and the commentary in relation to progress is totally inadequate. Some of it's actually rather helpful. And it's my understanding the previous mandate, this type of a report at times was brought to the House, the Assembly, by way of a written statement that gave MLAs an opportunity to ask questions in relation to the report. So just to continue to register concerns that I think this is an adequate way for OFMdFM on behalf of the Executive to report as to progress, but I don't think there are any proposals for any changes in the near future.
That's it for me in this member.
Just correspondence 6.5, there's a letter from the South Armagh Child Care Consortium. Can I just ask that we forward that to the department for a response?
So what page is this?
6.5 in correspondence 64, page 64.
Oh yes, the Childcare Consortium. So it says, I'm writing to you in your capacity as chairperson following a local meeting with yourself. So just what is the intent?
There's issues in relation to their application to Bright Start. They feel that they're unfairly treated, and there's a whole range of issues, and they basically want they want a meeting with officials, but they are writing to the department basically for answers or a response to.
But is it beyond a constituency issue? Because if it's a constituency issue, I'm not sure that it's a committee issue.
Well, that's fine. I've written to the department myself anyway, so.
Well, the one thing I would say, having
Just
read the letter, is it appears that this consortium decided they would not apply for money, for funding. Then when they said they weren't going to apply for funding, they were encouraged to apply for funding.
Yeah.
They were given help in completing the application form.
And an extension in the deadline.
An extension over the deadline, and then funding was denied, which seems an extraordinary way to do business.
I agree with you, Chair, but I think at the end of the day it is a constituency matter, and Megan has already said that she's written, and I noticed there that Danny Kennedy has already written as well. So it's obviously an issue that goes right across the board. And
okay, could we split? Yep, so go ahead.
Sure. I think it would be important, to send it on to the department, because there's a rural aspect to this as well, and there's little enough childcare in rural areas, without a project like that, which is playing an excellent role, being jeopardised. And I think to emphasise the importance of this, I feel it should go to the department, and I would like the backing of this committee for that, even just for, because it's a rural issue as well.
Could I suggest that we split the difference? I'd be very happy to do that, Bronwyn, if the committee is convinced that there's a policy issue here, which there may well be. I mean, I think it is, on the face of it, extraordinary, the sequence of events. So perhaps if we could ask Megan, and maybe contact Danny and say, if you think there is a policy issue arising from your discussions with the department, we would like to be made aware of it, which lifts it above a constituency issue. Because if we start doing constituency issues, there's 11 of us. We could get ourselves bogged down. So we'd be happy enough. So Bronwyn, you're happy enough that if it becomes a policy issue, then it sits at this table. Okay, thank you. Anything else on correspondence, members? Okay, we move on to the first SL1, which is an extension to the Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry. We've had correspondence from the department on this proposal, extending the time frame for 1 year. The clerk's brief's at page 120, and then the rest follows on from that. I think it was June last year, Sir Anthony met with ministers and made that request for a 1 year extension to the date by which the inquiry submits its report. Ministers subsequently advised us that the matter required agreement from the Executive. That was achieved in July. The estimated cost of the extension is $4 million, and members will recall the HA inquiry has been allocated $5 million by way of a baseline in the draft budget for 2015-16. The Department undertook a focused consultation on this proposal, and all respondents were broadly supportive of the draft order. Before I ask you about that, members, so I'm sure we are all aware of Justice Tracy's ruling on the judicial review brought by a victim who was unhappy that they had been denied access to their own legal representation at the HIA. And it seems to me this could have very serious financial implications for the HIA. Having said that, that's a ruling from Justice Tracy. I assume the right of appeal rests with the department. Whether or not they exercise it, I have no idea. But if the ruling sticks, it could have very serious financial implications. As I understand it, nobody has been given their own legal representation. And members, I don't know if anybody's taken a look at the cost protocol that has flowed from the legislation drawn up by the HIA. But if you want to apply for funding in respect of legal representation, you must do it in writing, and you have to satisfy no fewer than 9 criteria. And I'd just like to quote one to you. One of the things that you have to do is convince the HIA of the nature of the public interest that will be served by an award being made from public funds for legal representation. Now, some of these victims would very clearly be vulnerable people without a huge capacity for engagement in these processes. But they're being asked to prove the nature of the public interest, not the benefit to them. And surely, actually, the ultimate public interest is that the victim has the capacity, either through themselves or agents such as legal representatives, to present the best case and get the most out of this inquiry. So,
Just, I don't disagree with anything you've said, but I just wonder where the ruling leaves victims who are already through the process, in terms of if there is a policy change. Would it not be better if we got officials along to explain, get the office's view, OFMdFM view on the issue, see exactly where we are. And I mean, they will be obviously very aware of the cost implications as well, and that's something that we can question them on.
I mean, I think one thing I would like to know, Jimmy, is how many people applied for legal representation,
I think that's fair.
and how many. I think that it's the same number were declined. I don't think anybody's been given representation. I'm just, I must say, having read this schedule, quite concerned about how many hoops you have to jump through, given, say, the capacity of some of the victims, which is not a criticism, it's just an acknowledgement that we are, by definition, talking some vulnerable people among that pool of victims. So we're content we will write to the department. One of the questions we'll ask is how many people applied so far.
Could we not ask for officials to come along and brief us on the points that...
Yes.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's an appeal coming. But yeah, let's do that. Okay. So beyond that, members, we have this proposal for the 1-year extension through the SL1. Are members content with the proposal for the rule? Yeah, thank you. Members, the draft order has already been laid in the business office. Should it not have come to us first?
Yes.
Should have come to us first. Well, it's already been laid in the business office, and it will be provided for consideration by the committee at next week's meeting, along with the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. And following our consideration of the draft order, it will be tabled for debate in plenary by the business committee. But as I say, it should have come to us first before it went to the business office.
Does it get back to us, Chair, as an SR then next week? Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
The second one, members, we considered at our last meeting a policy proposal to increase the salary of the Northern Ireland Ombudsman and Commissioner for Complaints. And if you remember, we agreed to defer because there was a question mark with respect to policy for senior salary increases. The clerk's brief's at page 135 and the proposal is at 136. Now, the salary for the post of Ombudsman and Commissioner for Complaints is based on salary scales within the judiciary, and in its 36th report in March of last year, the Senior Salaries Review Body recommended that the salary relating to Judicial Group 6.1, which is the Ombudsman's, should be increased by 1%. Now, Mr Frawley is currently working 3 days a week, has been since the start of January 2014. So on that basis, the increase would represent in hard cash £767 per annum. And it's proposed that the rule would come into operation retrospectively beginning on the 1st of April last. Any comments or observations, members? If not, are we content with the proposal for the rule?
Well, we're not really content, but do we have a choice?
Well, I think we would be singling out the Ombudsman amongst whatever number of people fall within Judicial Group 6.1, the others presumably having already received, so it would seem somewhat punitive. So, in short, no.
Of the other categories previously at the committee?
Sorry, Alex?
Was there a vote in respect of other categories of office holders at the committee?
I'm not sure because it wouldn't be us.
No.
This presumably would be the Committee on Justice who would have had it, because this is a judicial band. So content, as in the sort of political sense of it, goes forward. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Once the draft order has been laid in the Business Office, it will be provided for consideration by the Committee along with the relevant report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Right, members, we now move on to our first briefing. It's in relation to an inquiry into building a united community. And we have two witnesses, Professor Colin Knox from the University of Ulster, also Sarah McWilliams of Juniper Consulting. They made a written submission to our inquiry, and that was based on work they did evaluating the OFMdFM sponsored Contested Spaces Interface Programme. That submission is at page 144 of your packs. We've got a cover note from the clerk before that. That begins at page 141. So, Colin, Sarah, very welcome. Thank you for coming along. You are our first oral witnesses in our inquiry, so we feel we're taking a big step forward with this. Could I invite you to make some short opening observations?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chair, committee members, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to provide oral evidence. We'll keep our opening remarks brief, but we'd like to give you just a short overview of the programme and then focus on some of the high-level outcomes from the evaluation and some transferable principles learning. So just to recap, the programme was launched in March 2011. It was jointly funded by OFMdFM and the Atlantic Philanthropies. The budget was £4 million. Its key aim was to promote and improve relations between and across disadvantaged communities. In order to apply, projects needed at least one community organisation at each side of the interface and be in the top 20% most deprived wards in Northern Ireland. There were 4 areas of focus: early years and parenting, shared space via schools, youth engagement and shared neighbourhoods. There were 9 projects funded across Northern Ireland in urban and rural areas, and there were 2 phases. The first phase ended in June last year, and the second phase will end in March this year. So just to move on then to the outcomes, and I suppose we're going to focus at a high level on 6 of the key outcomes. The first one would be around strengthened relationships and engagement at a personal level, at a professional and a cross-community level. And by that we mean really stronger and committed working relationships where there is trust and sharing, and engagement which may have started out with some reluctance has now developed to a point where there is strong desire for participants to engage and a strong growth in the number of people engaging. The second area is around improved quality of outcomes. The programme, I suppose, started out with broad outcomes around improving relationships between communities and encouraging reconciliation. But now it is much more and much wider than that, and we have seen evidence of outcomes around well-being, such as improved confidence, overcoming fears and anxiety, tackling social isolation of vulnerable people, and active engagement in communities. The third outcome would be improved educational and skills outcomes, be that for children, young people, schools, parents. The fourth area would be improved access to services. So in addition to the services projects themselves provide, they would also be connecting participants to other services in the community, such as other parenting services, health, youth, accessing further courses in education. There's also now a greater movement across and through contested spaces areas. So where there might have been an initial apprehension, this has changed to much greater and freer movement across areas that the projects are in, be that in Belfast, Derry, Londonderry, Portadown, Bessbrook, Newton Stewart and Ballymena. And finally, the creation of new shared spaces. So the 50-50 basis of the programme has encouraged projects to find shared spaces for their activities. And now we're seeing an increase on multiple examples of new shared spaces, be that a town hall, a youth club, a school, a community centre. So the second area, just to briefly touch on, is transferable principles or learning. We have found that in uniting people and communities around common shared issues, rather than just a direct head-on goods relations approach. This has been very effective by way of building relationships between communities. And by shared issues, we mean things like education, parenting, childcare, bullying or drugs or alcohol. And as research has shown, communities at interfaces are some of the most deprived in Northern Ireland. Therefore, good relations and poverty deprivation are interlinked and cannot be addressed in isolation. Therefore, the goal should be around improving quality of life and breaking that multi-generational cycle of deprivation. We found that the most effective models of working by projects have been those that have engaged and built up relationships with a wide variety of participants, such as children, their parents, teachers, statutory organisations, community groups, thereby securing maximum buy-in and impact. And related to this, we believe that collaboration is important. Projects that have managed to successfully and effectively engage the statutory, community and voluntary sectors to support their work are delivering good outcomes for participants in the communities. And finally, sustainability. Rather than just sustaining the projects in this programme, we believe we need to identify how to sustain the learning from the ideas, the concepts, good models of practice from the programme and transfer these to other areas. So just to sum up, the projects funded through the Contested Spaces programme are demonstrating very good outcomes for participants and the areas where they operate. We believe that there is learning and ways of working from the programme that can be transferred and used elsewhere going forward. Saying that, there have of course been challenges and obstacles to overcome. However, projects have adapted their approaches and learned from their experiences. And just finally, we hope that the continuing implementation of TBUC can reflect the experiences of the Contested Spaces programme in some way, particularly good practice and effective ways of supporting communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Would it be fair to say that in terms of your analysis of contested spaces, looking at how we deliver TBUC, that the suggestion is there's no need to reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, and I suppose, Chair, one of the things that did surprise us a little bit about the, I suppose, lead into TBUC is that if you take the United Youth programme in TBUC, they start off with a very kind of traditional model of saying we need to do pilots. Now, one of the questions that we have asked is, so why do you need to do pilots if you're already funding a programme that essentially has done some of this work to test out some of those ideas? So I think that is probably a very traditional approach to new initiatives, but some of these things are not new. You know, I'm not suggesting for one moment that all of the learning is contained within this programme, but there are many good examples out there of youth programmes. So my point is, why would you spend £1 million doing a pilot on youth programme? Just as one example.
Okay. Can I drill down into how you turn, or how reluctance was turned into a kind of strong desire participate? Are there key elements that come through?
Certainly one of the things that we experienced that was most successful was not to see this as, if you like to call it, an upfront community relations or good relations programmes. In other words, the programmes that we found to be most effective were those that identified a common need across both sides of the interface. So rather than seeing this as a programme that was overtly about good relations or community relations, at interface areas, the social problems are the same. And it's really about identifying what are the common social issues, what are the common economic issues here, and can you tackle those in a way where both communities benefit? And in a sense, the traditional boundaries become much more porous. So it's not about saying we're going in here to make Catholics more Protestants or Protestants more Catholic, but rather to say, what are what psychologists call superordinate goals here? What are the things that, if you like, overarch both of those communities? Get that understanding, and then as a consequence, good relations, reconciliation effects follow suit. So it's a much more organic way of dealing with it. So, for instance, we did a project there. The projects were supported, 2 schools on the Limestone Road. Both schools suffered from, as identified by themselves, poor parenting skills, they said. Now, that was an issue that was common, and some of the interventions were around about helping those parents to help their children to read, to get some routine into their lives, etc., etc. Skills that organisations that have some expertise in this area could bring to parents. The benefit of that was that parents were in these sessions to become better parents, if you like. They weren't there because one was from one side of the Limestone Road, the other was from the other. As a consequence of that, they started to trust each other, that actually we have similar kind of problems here, and we're here together to learn how to deal with those problems. And that broke down the personal relationships or the personal perceptions, and we found that a way of establishing trust.
Okay, that's most interesting. So you're not going in saying to people on the left-hand side of the wall, you've got to be working with the people on the right-hand side of the wall. You're saying, you've got an issue. Did you know they've got the very same issue?
Right.
But why would that motivate me if I'm sitting on the left side of the wall with poor parenting skills? How do you convince me of the benefit?
Well, the motivation is that every parent wants a better experience for their child. And that's a common issue. So if you want a better education for your child, you'll say, perhaps I could get that if I had some skills that would improve my parenting. So the issue is not, I'm better than you, or you're better than me, or I want to be motivated to go to one side of the interface or not. But it's simply to say, we acknowledge, we have expressed through our own schools. So both of these, one was Curry School, the other was Holy Family School. They identified within their own school environment that we can do things to help our children here. So the superordinate goal there was, we want to have a better life for our children. We want our children to be better educated.
And is there an element of kind of strength in numbers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How important is is leadership? Because I get a sense that sometimes these programmes, when they succeed because there is an individual who's absolutely core as a driver of the initiative.
The projects have had good leadership, but I think where they succeeded is, we talked about the kind of a partnership approach where they have drawn in, say with the schools, the community organisations, the police, health, so they've kind of drawn in all the resources from the community around them, and therefore there's leadership, but there's partnership working, and that, I suppose creates ownership as well. And is very effective.
I think particularly
rather than just one person leading it, but it does take good leadership as well.
I think that's particularly true. Just to add to Sarah's explanation, in schools. So if you're working on a school project and don't have strong leadership from principals there, it can fall off at the edges a bit, particularly if things start to go a bit wobbly on them. So if they get a bad experience. There's one project, for instance, where schools were coming together to work together, and there was an incident between pupils. Now, was an isolated incident, but had the principals not have been strong in those circumstances, they could well have said, look, my life would be easier if we didn't have this kind of work. So it is absolutely crucial, particularly, I suppose, I don't say this in a negative way, but a school environment which is maybe more hierarchical than other organisations, where they get that leadership from the top.
So you've got programmes which can be effectively templated, but they'll only work on the ground if you've got strong on the ground leadership.
Yeah.
Prepared to look after the bad days as well.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Absolutely.
Any big difference between rural and urban?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose one of the things, just to say, I'm using a specific example here of a project that worked in East Belfast and one that worked in Newton Stewart. And the geography of East Belfast was such that proximity meant that interfaces were very visible and so on. Whereas in rural areas, those were almost invisible, but nonetheless, everybody knew where they were. The other thing is that we found, just by dint of working in rural areas, particularly rural schools, they really appreciated any extra resources because they tended to be, operating on a shoestring, particularly small primary schools with limited financial resources. So any kind of intervention, they were always very welcoming at the start. To at least they saw, is this worth doing, and then were more than happy to participate.
And more so than urban?
No, I wouldn't say more so, but our sense, certainly in this particular project, was that some urban schools might have had more access to resources than rural schools by dint of the geography and the distance between schools. I suppose the other thing, just at a parental level, because a lot of the stuff that we saw, which were good models, had parent buy-in. There's the sense of community around rural areas where, if it's a farming community, perhaps farmers are lenting one another machinery and that kind of thing. There's, if I can say this without being disparaging to urban areas, there's a civility around rural communities there that maybe you don't just witness as much in urban communities.
Deputy Chair, Chris Hill.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I've found the written brief provided very helpful, but I've also the benefit of having met with some of the projects involved in the Contested Spaces programme, particularly the project around active, respectful communities that was led by Community Relations in Schools. It took 6 schools in Ardoyne and Shankill, brought them together for early years, family work, parenting work and community relations education, and I think it's become known now as the buddy scheme. It's obviously community relation in schools term, and it's been inserted into the Building United Community strategy as well. I was sceptical in relation to that whenever I first saw it in T-Book, but having met with the CRIS organisation and with the people involved in the project, I've experienced firsthand the benefits that it's had for the areas. Surprisingly, not just the young people getting to interact from starkly different backgrounds, but grown men from the Shankill and Ardoyne who openly confessing that they had interaction as a result of this that they would never normally have, and indeed, important to remember, takes great courage for them to have as well. In some of those communities, interacting with people from the quote-unquote wrong side is extremely risky and does take quite a lot of courage. So I think the benefits of the projects are clear and should be developed. My big concern and query, I suppose, is Contested Spaces finished around April 2014, Phase 1. Phase 2, I think, runs until March 2015, so almost finished. T-Book was published in around May 2013. And yet many of these excellent pilot programmes don't appear to have been taken forward by T-Book at the rate we would like to see. The buddy scheme, for example, my understanding is, having met with Department of Education officials, that it's still at business case stage, and yet, as you've alluded to in some of your presentation, these are well-developed projects that are showing positive evaluation and results. So have you seen any more evidence than I have of OFMdFM and other departments working proactively and rapidly to ensure that we don't lose the ground that has been gained by the successful delivery of some of these projects?
We made a presentation this morning to the Good Relations Programme Board. So, civil servants, officials, special advisors are interested in this work. It's probably something to do with the system of moving from this into implementation of Building the United Community, where there's some kind of chasm. I mean, it's not that the learning isn't there and they're not aware of it, but the pace at which Building the United Community seems to be unfolding isn't aligned with some of the learning that is emerging from this. Yeah, phase 1 finished last March. The second phase and end of the programme will finish in March of 2015. And that's why we're keen to push the principles here rather than saying, right, give us more money for these projects, because, you talked about the buddy scheme. That is one of the commitments in Building the United Communities. That organisation, Chris, has developed that as a concept. They're very proud of their work in it. They should be. It's been very successful. So I think, the learning is there. It's kind of, so where does that go in Building the United Communities? And it does seem, as outsiders, to get kind of kicked around between the department, the boards, the new authority. No one's quite sure where it will end up. But in the meantime, our fear is that the bigger the distance from these programmes, then the learning, the experience, the trust that has been developed starts to dissipate. Now, some of the relationships will still exist, but often that needs to be oiled with resources to help with further interventions. I'm not saying that all of these projects that are paid for at the public push should continue indefinitely with more and more funding. That's why we've tried to stress transferability of principles rather than projects here.
I think you make a really, really important point, though. There's people who take risks, show courage and get involved in these projects, and then that time period where it stops or it's not sustained really damages people's confidence in continuing to be involved in this type of project. The director, a senior presentation, the director of Good Relations in OFMdFM, I don't think that's still the case, but Fergus McDevitt said that there's real potential to scale up some of the models which Contested Spaces programme pilots developed in difficult interface areas, but I just, the speed at which that is happening is frighteningly slow. So hopefully your good work is being heeded by the department, and we'll see a dramatic increase in the pace at which that's sustained and rolled out then. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Just on that theme, Chris, of things starting and then stopping again, I often think that for people it's almost like being in a game of snakes and ladders. You introduce an initiative and you go up a very nice ladder to a better place, and just as you get there and begin to enjoy it, you're hit with a big snake because the funding of the programme's cancelled, and you actually feel worse off because you knew where you were.
Yeah, and sorry, can I just give one very good example of that, Chair? We worked in Bestbrook in South Armagh, and one of the issues there was shared space, or the absence of shared space. And the project there was very successful, called SAC. Spent quite a bit of time negotiating between churches about venues that would traditionally have been seen to being aligned to one church or the other. But they spent a lot of time negotiating access to those. Were successful in doing that and demonstrated that the trust that the individual churches put in them was well founded, in the sense that subsequent programmes that they ran in these were very much cross-community and very much meeting needs in the area. Now, a question mark for us is, having gone through that process and essentially made those shared spaces rather than contested or single identity institutions, because they won't have the funding to run those activities subsequently, do those buildings then revert to what they were, single identity issues? And I mean, these are organisations and buildings that, at the heart of communities that have had lots of conflict.
Absolutely. Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah Collins, for your presentation. And I think for me it's always a conundrum as to how do we measure this type of work, because we all know that there are loads and loads of projects right across a whole range of communities and sectors which are excellent, and some of those will have predated this project and some of them will outlive the project. Some of them, although they're maybe ended last the phase last year. They're still ongoing. And for me, it's been almost a wee bit like trying to reduce the fear of crime among elderly people about burglaries. And you can reduce the crime against elderly people by 50%. You get one highly publicised burglary and you scare the life out of the population. So it's like what you're actually looking for ultimately, I think. And I was very encouraged by both yourself, Colin, and Sarah early on when you were saying that there appears to be a wider range of positive outcomes as a result of some of this activity. Because again, I'm not sure we always know what we're actually really, if we're honest, trying to work out what we're really trying to measure.
Yeah.
Because I do favour doing a lot of work which is just because the work needs done by its nature. Yes, and you can do it on a cross community basis. You can actually bring people together and build other bridges at the same time. We all know that for years we spent probably a long time having coffee mornings and people get together, but as long as you didn't talk about the troubles or didn't talk about the differences you had, it was great, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and
So,
I think, you know, by focusing on common issues,
yeah.
you know, as education, homework support, childcare, sometimes those issues do come up in conversation when people have built up that relationship. You know, they will make friendships, but be unaware maybe that that person, you know, is from a different community. But, you know, things will enter into conversation, but I suppose they happen naturally, and people are, you know, quite accepting.
But is there a way of weaving, because if we don't face a reality that there are differences,
Absolutely.
and deal with what the differences actually are,
Yeah.
or empower people to do that?
Yeah, but there has been different approaches used by each of the different projects.
Yeah.
And to go back to Chris, they would take a very direct approach sometimes and would have very good workshops and residentials with the children and parents, whereas other projects have to focus on common issues and, you know, address kind of issues of community relations through that, but not, you know, directly. So I think different approaches work well in different situations, and it doesn't always have to be a head-on approach, but certainly they do recognise, you know, that those issues need to be discussed and talked about when appropriate.
But is there a point at which, last point, Chair, in terms of the key thing would be around like sustaining the learning or transferring that on an organic basis? So how do we, because when you're identifying what is a need in an area, that actually might mean that you just need the education system or the health system or the community itself needs to work out. You need to examine your practices and take responsibility for that. So really, I would say a lot of it would probably ultimately require mainstreaming, just so that the learning is built in and the problems are addressed on a one basis. Which then, for me, should then filter out a lot of those very important issues, but allows community then to focus down, well, why are we different? And, you know, let's learn how to respect that, because unless you really get the nub somewhere along the line, you know, we can all be dead friendly to each other, but we're not talking about the problems, which means you never address it.
Yeah, I mean, just to expand a little bit on the community relations in school model, which I think is excellent in terms of the point that you're making, Alex, because they start off saying, so what is the common issue here for parents? In that particular model, they were saying, right, we can do things better to educate our children together. Once they do that, in a sense, they have, I don't mean this in a pejorative way, they have hooked the parents. You know, the parents become interested in that process of learning with their children. What they then do is they invite those parents to residentials, and those parents know each other very well then. They know each other in a very natural setting very well then. They've built up trust. And we've sat in these residential, they don't pull any punches in terms of some of those hard issues. So it's not to suggest that somehow or other those are brushed under the carpet, but rather that they're dealt with in an environment where trust has already been created around an issue which is out with, you know, the conflict and sectarianism and so on.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In terms of single identity work, how much more needs to be done, do you think, as a sort of precursor to groups engaging in this interface and cross-community type work?
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here.
I didn't mean that to be a grenade.
I wouldn't be a great fan of single identity work at this stage in where we've got to. I mean, I think that should now be passé. I think, you know, clearly there are difficulties within communities, particularly communities that have suffered a lot over the whole conflict area. But I think it is time, and we've reached circumstances politically and so on, where single identity work should be very much a minor lead-in to stuff that is cross-community. I think we've moved beyond that, and I think we should have moved beyond that, and I think we've spent enough money on that kind of single identity work. And I think there are models that are now in place that do accept and respect people's right to their own identity, and perhaps a nervousness around that initial meeting and so on. But there are ways of tackling that, and there are some, excellent kind of facilitators and mediators in this work now that are very skilled at that kind of work.
Okay.
Sarah, you're going to disagree?
Yes, no, I agree, because I think
Some support.
these projects have proven that, where they might have had a small bit of single identity work, say with young people in Portadown, but they quickly moved to joint activities. So yes, maybe I agree with Colin, maybe if it's necessary a small amount, but quickly moving on.
Okay, let me expand it then to beyond the kind of areas where you were looking at, which was contested spaces. What about an area where it is a single identity geography, and where actually there are issues, because it may be a single identity village or town or whatever, but it's not homogenous, that there are
factions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the projects that we worked with was shared education in the Foyle area. Now, schools were relatively close, but we could see circumstances if you were trying to roll that out, as indeed the Department of Education will be doing with shared education, where the geography, particularly around large urban spaces like Belfast, where the geography is such that you don't have the same opportunities for cross-community work than other areas. That said, transport permitting, and usually in urban areas that's not such a big issue, I think Sarah's agreeing that they should move as quickly as possible into pairing up with schools, buddying up with schools. The quicker they get into that, the better.
Yeah. I think my point is, I just think in some areas, intra-community is as important for that grouping as cross-community is for many others. But I say that I accept that's beyond where you were evaluating contested space. Alex Atwood.
Yes, this is the sort of how long is a piece of string question. I appreciate that, and I probably have a sense of what your answer will be. But as you indicated, the interfaces are more visible in the urban area, and they're very visible in certain parts of Belfast. And the walls, 21 or whatever it is that we have now. Given that physical separation, but given the work that you've been involved in, what's your sense of where people are in relation to doing something more concrete and material in respect of the interfaces themselves, the structures, as opposed to the emotions and the other expressions of separation?
I think, I suppose these projects have worked in certain areas and maybe have a limited geography. And I think in certain areas things are, say for North Belfast, are still quite fragile at times. But again, going back to projects there, even when there have been issues of, parades or flags or disputes, that the participants, particularly parents, have maybe there's been a slight step back, but they have come back in greater numbers to participate, and almost saying, well, we want to do this work, we want to engage. So I think, each community will be different, but there is now, I suppose, a resilience and a desire to move forward in the projects that we've experienced, despite, a few setbacks. So I'd say more work needs to be done, but there is a good foundation, I think.
Around any of these projects, did people get their heads together and say, well, how can we moderate these structures?
Yeah, and a good example of that is the schools that the community relations in schools projects were working with, where they were saying, we have to get a bus to go to this school if we negotiated some space across the peace walls. This project would operate better. So in this particular case, they went to a supermarket and said, you know, if you opened this gate, which is your property, we could easier access other schools. So they were taking those kind of decisions themselves. And, you know, it was really encouraging to see parents, again, on behalf of their children, saying, this might have divided us in the past, but now we see a better future for our children. And as I said, just to re-emphasise, the common learning in all of that was they'd identified an issue that was common to both communities and they wanted to resolve it. I mean, just to go back to your point about communities at interface areas, particularly visible interface areas, I mean, the one thing that is very obvious to us and probably obvious to you too, but is the whole issue of social deprivation in those communities. That seems not to have moved on a lot, despite some resources, quite a few bit of resources being targeted at those communities. Now, is that because these communities have been so neglected in terms of public services? Or, you know, how do we move those communities on? Because those peace walls won't be tackled just by pulling down the walls. You know, those communities are the most deprived, and they feel it. And they don't see that, to use the kind of rhetoric, that peace dividend that other parts of Northern Ireland do. And that's why I think if we were able to, through the Built and United community, push that together in terms of the common needs of those communities and do it in a way that was not artificial or contrived or good relations type work that has that symbolism of we want to make you all products. That, you know, that kind of work, I think, would have real meaning for those communities. And I think you would see much more buy-in collectively from them. And it's identifying what are the common issues for you.
And how to solve them.
And how to solve them, yeah.
As you say, a lot of money has been
Yeah.
put in.
Yeah.
But nobody could be content with the outcomes.
But the only thing that I would say in relation to that, and I'm not here with a magic wand, is a lot of money has been put in to each community. Has the money really been put in a way, A, cutting across government departments, for needs are not parcelled into individual government departments, and B, has it been put in a way which is sees these communities as a collective rather than some of the parts, you know?
One final question. I think you hinted at the answer, maybe gave the answer earlier, but did you find that people involved in projects were more resilient when around them things are more volatile?
Yeah, absolutely. And
It's a determination to continue to engage in the project and not, okay, there may be a few wobbles and but I think the vast majority of people have made that decision themselves to continue to engage and encourage others to engage as well.
So, again, to be more specific then, so at the height of the flags impasse, the people, whatever about the...
Yeah, I mean, there were some projects that have had a few issues and they pulled back temporarily, but then went back, you know, and continued.
Yeah, and did that of their own volition. You know, people involved in delivering their projects were saying, you know, we're sensitive to the fact that it might be difficult for you to go here or go there. But it was actually them coming back that give project deliverers confidence and saying, you know, these people are saying we don't want that to be an impediment to us doing it. Now, they were sensible about it in terms of just their own security, etc. But no, I think your point is spot on in terms of maybe it's the nature of people who go on these projects and are willing to become participants for change, that they are slightly more resilient. But as Chris was saying, I mean, we've witnessed in some of these parent sessions, people who are hardliners in their own community have, well, maybe this is the wrong description, but softened to the extent that they say, this has got to change, and it's got to change for the next generation, and we're going to be part of that to make it happen, and we're going to be part of it collectively.
Good.
Stephen Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming along today. If I picked you up right at the start in your opening remarks, you talked about the particular benefits of intergenerational projects. Can I ask you to expand on that? We have the Curbs group in Portadown, which are doing a great work among the youth. Not only on a cross-community basis, but cross-cultural, because we're finding there's many issues that are cross-cultural in our area. than there are as cross-community issues. I mean, I would like to have seen that not only a youth project but across all ages.
Yeah.
You know, so I just want to, would you expand on that?
Well, I mean, I can say to you, absolutely endorse your comments about Curbs. Curbs is an excellent project. Clearly, they have to work within certain parameters. They do, I suppose, see that their expertise is primarily in youth work, and they have done great work around that, and particularly some of the working with ethnic minorities as part of that youth project. And I think one of the successes of the Curbs project has been working across statutory organisations. So they're working with statutory organisations, they're working with youth groups. They have, again, turned some of those, maybe turn's the wrong word, but they've transformed some of those contested spaces into shared spaces that, you know, YMCA, St Mary's Hall, all those places that you would know very well. But they haven't, to a great extent, concentrated on that intergenerational work. And I don't think they would claim that they have done a lot of that. Now, some other projects would have done more of it, but we didn't have, just in terms of the spread of the projects, projects that specifically targeted that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. But I think just excellent outcomes and what the way they work with young people, and especially the use of media and sport, and very innovative work that they're doing. And I think, you know, they would make a lot of films and DVDs, and we've been to a number of events, and they're really fantastic.
Absolutely, and I endorse that.
Yeah.
But the problems that we find emanating at weekends, especially in a cross-cultural area, are not coming from the teenagers and the older people.
Right.
The older generation, you know, and if there was something that could be maybe in the future to address that, I think that's
Yeah,
what we'd like.
and I think Curbs is or CIP is a great organisation that, you know, could move forward with that.
But sorry, sir. Can I just pick up on a point that you haven't made there that I think maybe ties into the Building United Communities? I mean, there is a project in Craigavon which is doing excellent work with young people, doing summer camps, doing sports programmes. Now, you look at the headline actions in T-Buck and you say, so why is the learning from that project not being immediately transferred into T-Buck? Why are they starting off with yet more pilots when they could go to Portadown? I'm not saying Portadown, Craigavon is the only example of that, but just by dint of the kind of work that we're doing, we're saying, so, you know, here's some excellent examples of stuff that's going on in areas where kids are hard to reach, etc., etc. Why can't we see the immediate transfer of that into Building a United Community? Why are they going out? It's almost as if we've never done this before. We start with a clean sheet. We're going out for pilots, etc., etc.
Okay.
I know that this is an inquiry, but given that point that's just been made, why are we not replicating in T-Buck that which is working in a hard place? Why do we not just ask? You know, are we recreating the wheel here unnecessarily?
Yes. Yeah, and on that, Colin and Sarah, Colin, you've made very clear your questioning of the wisdom and the funding of these pilots. We would need to get a sense from you the extent to which you think OFMdFM have learned the lessons from the likes of Contested Space programme and are transferring them into T-Buck. Beyond pilots, are there other things you would be critical of, and is there anything that you would speak in praise of in terms of the transfer?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think one of the big issues here is around shared education. Now, I think there's lots of learning in this project, which looked at schools in the Derry, Londonderry, foil contested space, it was called. I thought that was an excellent project, and again had, you know, very clear boundaries in terms of the river and schools on both sides of that river. Now, I think officials from OFMdFM have carried those kind of messages back to individual departments, and officials that we work with have been very good in doing that, and, you know, been very supportive of the work that we have done in that sense. I just think that's a little bit harder to infiltrate the system, you know, to move from the level of individuals into the system. And maybe the pace of government kind of grinds very slowly in that sense. But certainly I would say that kind of learning from the schools must offer great opportunities in taking the work of shared campuses, shared education programme, the work before the Education Committee now and the shared education bill. Like they're kind of ready-made models there that have lots of learning, including some of the obstacles that they had to address and tackle, and other schools will have to do likewise. So, once again, why not learn from that?
Yeah, and I think because of the leads of some of the, the headline and actions in TBUC are with other departments, that I suppose, to be able to, I suppose, communicate out from this to the other departments, their learnings from that. And yes, we did that this morning, but
well, I think that's the
challenge
challenge.
there, yeah.
And if I was going to finish positively, I think I say it's actually a culture rather than a speed of government that we do things vertically. You have environment, you have education, you have health and housing, and we now all know, unless you can deliver that horizontally, you won't make the big positive difference to people's lives.
Can I just make one final point, Chair? I mean, I think there are opportunities to do that out with central government now. So I would be very optimistic that community planning in the new 11 local authorities, if it operates as it should, yes, that I would kind of describe community planning as almost like delivering social change at the local level. Now, there are opportunities for holding government departments to account in the new 11 councils through, the local government legislation. Whether central government departments will be amenable to that, I think, is the challenge. And the second and final point that I'd make is, I think there's a real opportunity here for Peace 4. I don't think there's sufficient alignment between what Peace 4 is offering with £25 million €45 million for shared education, €50 million for children and young people, €90 million for shared spaces, and €30 million for civil society. This is the bread and butter of contested space. It's the bread and butter of building a united community. Why aren't we dovetailing these things in so that the learning doesn't just go from contested space and other good projects, but from contested space to building a united community to Peace 4? There's huge opportunities here.
Okay. So finally, Alex Edwin.
It was just, I got a sense from what you said, Sarah, about your meeting this morning. I don't want to put words in your mouth now, so I'm going to that you might have found it a bit frustrating. And in your latter comments, were you saying, why are we not merging Peace 4 with contested spaces with TBUC? Would it be fair to characterise your sense of things, including this morning, as frustrating?
I mean, let me give a kind of diplomatic answer to that, in the sense that I think there's a willingness on the part of officials in OFM that we deal with, and an appetite for change and a willingness to learn from these things. All of those things has been hugely positive and indeed very supportive of the kind of work we've done. Now, maybe they experience the same kind of sense of frustration as we have perhaps expressed, maybe too vividly. But there's something in the system here that creates blockages when, for outsiders like us, and maybe it's easy to say these things as an outsider, that pathway seems fairly clear.
That is forthright.
So, mark for us contested space out of 10 as a tool, a foundation stone for delivering TBUC.
Okay, so I'll jump in. Go ahead, please.
I would put it on the upper end. I think this still is, it's not perfect. So I would probably say 7.
Yeah, and I would agree with one caveat, and that is, I think to mark something like that requires a consistency in terms of the nature, the homogeneity of the projects. I think within those projects we were looking at 4 different strands, and I think some of them were a lot better than 7, some of them were less than 7, so maybe 7 is a good place to land.
Okay, and we have your breakdown in
Yeah.
your submission across those four.
I'm choosing the wrong side of the table, Chairman. Diplomatic.
Colin, Sarah, thank you very much. That was most informative.
Thank you
very
very
much indeed.
I like about the country people are dead gracious and the city folk are ignoramuses.
Okay, members, we now have a briefing from Stephen Agnew, MLA, on the Children's Services Cooperation Bill, which he introduced to the Assembly on the 8th of December last. The cover note from the clerk is on page 152 of your pack. The bill, as introduced, is at page 153, and the EFM at page 160. There's also a previous research paper at page 166, and then in tabled pack at page 40. There's another Assembly research paper which gives an update on the statutory duty to cooperate as introduced by the Children's Act of 2004 in England and Wales. And finally, there's a paper at page 50 of tabled from the Department for Children's Schools and Families, which compares interprofessional activity with regard to children's services in England and in Sweden. So we welcome Stephen and Ross Brown, research for the Green Party. Some opening comments, Stephen?
Sure, I'll be brief, Chair, because obviously this is the third time we've been in front of the committee. You have the bill, so I'll not go through it in detail. I suppose just to give you an update then, really, in the progress since the last time we've been in front of the committee. I think probably most significantly, after the launch of the bill this week, we've met with OFMdFM, and we've now agreed to cooperate on the bill and in getting it right. I think we've now got common cause in terms of the principles, and really have agreed to look at, assuming it passes second stage, potential future amendments that can maybe address some of the concerns that OFMdFM, and indeed if there are concerns within other departments, how we can address those, and as I say, trying to take that forward together where possible, I suppose in a similar manner as to what took place with the human trafficking bill. The committee may already be aware, as well as the support we now seem to be getting from OFMdFM. We have had support indicated either specifically for the bill or for the principle of a statutory duty from the Agriculture Minister, from the children's sector, sort of fronted by Children in Northern Ireland, from the Children's Commissioner, from the Criminal Justice Inspectorate, from UNESCO, from the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership, and from the Children's Law Centre, and indeed previously from this committee in 2008, when it in fact called for a statutory duty to cooperate. So as you can see, the principles are supported, and really, having done a lot of work to get it to this stage, really, assuming it goes through the Assembly, the debate has been confirmed for the 26th. Assuming that second stage debate goes through, really, then we're very much in the process now of working with others to try and get this bill progressed, but to get as well drafted a piece of legislation as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, very positive development if you're saying you've got common cause with the department. Can I just ask for clarification though, Stephen? I mean, I think the department were expecting a revised version of the bill sometime around November. So I suppose the question is, did OFMdFM see the bill as it was presented to the Assembly?
We've tried to include the department, or at least liaise with the department as much as possible, or sorry, the office, in producing the bill. In terms of the time delays, be completely candid, we had some issues with the drafting services, to the extent that one of the earlier drafts included the Department for Social Justice, which doesn't exist. We had things in the bill we didn't ask for that we had to get written out again. You know, we of course had policy changes, but in terms of, you know, the committee, say this is my third time in front of the committee. From I started the first meeting in the Bill's office. I think we're coming close to 3.5 years in process. But part of that's been trying to get it right, working with others. But part of that is difficulties in drafting services.
So in terms of the question, was that a yes or was that a no?
I'm trying to remember which was the last draft OFMdFM seen, and they might be able to confirm this, but this was certainly draft 10, I believe.
The one that was presented
the one that the
on the
final
8th of
bill
December?
was draft 10, yeah.
But you're not sure whether OFMdFM had seen that?
Prior to its introduction, as I say, they did see a later version, but I can't recall if it was the most recent version.
Okay. Outside of engagement with OFMdFM, which to emphasise, you're now saying that as of today is as good as you would hope for.
As I say, that's as good as we could make it, without the the drafting expertise that the departments would have.
Sure.
That's working with the Bills Office and our own, as I say, our legislative team.
So if we look, because you need a buy-in for a huge number of public bodies. Minister for Health and that department?
Minister for Health, we haven't had an update on the position from when we first, asked, and the response was that cooperative working was already happening and that legislation wasn't required. Now, as I say, part of the engagement work we'll be doing in conjunction with the OFMdFM will again be meeting the departments, because we have met with officials. But at that time it was stated that they believed cooperative working was already happening and legislation was unnecessary.
So, when was that?
That would have been 2012, I believe.
Right. So you haven't spoken to the current minister?
I haven't spoken to the current minister. We did meet with officials from the Department of Health who I suppose, and Ross can correct me if I'm wrong here, I suppose we're looking for an update from us, right, more than giving the minister's position.
Okay, Commissioner or the Commission for Children and Young People?
Yes, worked with them consistently through this. They commissioned a report from Queen's University, Barriers to Effective Governance, and one of its recommendations was for a statutory duty to cooperate. Mairead McCafferty, the Chief Executive and current Commissioner, spoke at the launch of the event, not only in support of it, but indeed explaining why the Children's Commission was in support of it. So we've had their support throughout, and indeed have engaged with them throughout. This is something they've been campaigning for some time.
Okay. There's a large number of public bodies, and they're actually listed at clause 4.7. I'm not going to go through them all, but to give a flavour, it's every health and social care trust, every district council, the housing executive, police service, probation board, council for Catholic maintained schools, and so it goes. Can you give us just a broad flavour of where you are with all the people who will have to buy into this if it becomes law?
Yes, sure. Well, I mean, just in terms of background, those specific bodies were referenced. I suppose the purpose of Clause 4 is to strengthen the work being done by the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership. A lot of evidence of it making a huge step forward in terms of improving integrated working. The list here is reflective of its membership. Now, it's not. It doesn't completely mirror its membership, because some of its members do not exist in legislation, which is why, for example, we have the whole Department of Justice as opposed to just the agencies which are members of the CYPSP. You can't refer in legislation to a body that doesn't exist in legislation, so we had to, I suppose, go a level higher. In terms of the support from those bodies, the Department of Justice, I believe, are supportive. We haven't got that in writing, but I suppose.
So why do you believe they're supportive?
If the member doesn't mind me saying so, at the launch of the event, Mr. Chris Little, Deputy Chair of this committee, said that he and the ministers of his party were supportive of the bill. So okay. I take that as a kind of fairly reliable witness. But
so we shall take the Deputy Chair's silence as confirmation.
I'll come in, Chair. Chair.
Okay.
In terms of the, I suppose, the Education Authority, I suppose our engagement at this point has been with the Minister. The Minister has said that he is relaxed about legislation to cooperate. that if it's the Assembly's will, that he wouldn't be opposed to it. He, I suppose, it'd be fair to say, again, similar to the Health Minister, would question whether or not it's necessary, because we'd argue that the Department of Education and Health are cooperating. But I suppose in answer to both those ministers, I would say that's certainly not the evidence that's coming forward to us from the children's sector and statutory agencies such as NICI. The councils, again, we consulted, we sent the consultation document out to each of the councils. I believe only one responded.
Limavady Council responded. Just to flag up as well, all of our consultation responses that we received, 27 in total, I believe now, perhaps slightly more, were in favour of the duty to cooperate, and some of these bodies, including Limavady Council, did respond.
I suppose in the interest of time, it's fair to say that each of these bodies is representative in the CYPSP, which in itself supports, in principle, a statutory duty to cooperate. So as a corporate body, as members of that corporate body, I suppose implicitly, each of these members have been implicated. But I suppose we wouldn't have, at this stage, had, as I say, the consultations went out to I think it was, if I remember right, over 400 organisations. Sorry, 300 consultees. Not all responded, obviously, given, and so to some extent, as individual organisations, we don't know for every case. But as I say, the CYPSP as a corporate body supports a statutory duty.
Okay. Well, I think that covers that sort of consultation piece. I'd like to ask something about the detail of the bill in a minute, but there are other members. Jimmy Spratt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. Just in relation to, given that there is cooperation between departments, might be perfect. I think it's never perfect in government, but a bit unclear as to the need to bring another bureaucratic process on whenever there is that sort of cooperation. I mean, what investigation have you given into the current collaboration between various departments on these issues?
I think there has been evidence of some good practice of cooperation, and I suppose what I would say is the idea of the legislation is to make good practice common practice. The work of the CYPSP is the most often cited example of interagency working, but the CYPSP itself would say that, one, it works at an agency level, and often the cooperation isn't happening higher up at interdepartmental level. But it would also say it also relies on a lot of goodwill. So whilst CYPSP sits within health, and whilst there's a duty on the agencies of health to cooperate with these external agencies, there isn't a reciprocal duty for them to equally cooperate. So it currently lies on a situation of goodwill. Cooperation isn't a core duty of these organisations unless they're sitting within health. And I suppose the rationale is that core duties, when resources are stretched, core duties are what you do. Cooperation becomes something that's nice to do, but isn't a core function. So it's really about embedding that. In terms of bureaucracy, I would argue that the legislation proposes to reduce bureaucracy, and I would always give the example of early intervention. As a member of the All-Party Group for Children and Young People, we had a presentation from the CYPSP, and they identified 5 funding streams for early intervention strategies. That's 5 sets of administration. As also the organisations applying for that funding having to do 5 separate applications to do the same type of work to achieve the same outcomes. That's administratively burdensome, both on the organisations providing the funding and the organisations receiving the funding. The idea of this bill is if you had cooperation between those departments, and if they chose to align budgets, or preferably, as this bill would give provision for, pool budgets, you could have one set of administration for one pot of funding to which organisations could apply into. So it's actually about reducing administration, and indeed, and this is something I've just come across recently, but I can provide to the committee. If you look at some councils in England, Barnsley and Brighton and Hove, where they've been audited, there's evidence that integrated working has made considerable improvements in terms of efficiency. The Audit Commission in 2008 awarded 3 stars out of 4 its assessment of Barnsley Council in relation for value for money, and that is and I say the details in the evidence which I can provide to the committee, a direct result of integrated services.
Well, I mean, in terms of the suggestion or the possible suggestion that the bill could lead to increased bureaucracy and perhaps even duplication of reporting, what way do you think that could be, or that concern could be covered in the bill?
It's an important point, actually, and something we have discussed with officials. There's nothing in the bill that says the reporting must be discreet. So, for example, there's already required reporting on the 10-year strategy for children, and there's required reporting on the child poverty strategy. There's nothing in the bill that says that this has to be discrete reporting. It's specifically reporting on how departments are cooperating, but that could be done, for example, within an already existing report as an extra section, specifically talking about achieving either the high-level outcomes that are in the 10-year strategy, or indeed in the requirements of the child poverty strategy. In that reporting, they could also report on how they're cooperating. So, whilst it's a bit extra, I would say not without good cause. The other thing I would say in clause 4, specifically on the Children's Services Plan, currently there's a requirement to review and report every year. We're proposing 3 years, so that would actually reduce bureaucracy. And that was, I think it's fair to say, some of the consultation responses we got back said that they believed the reporting should be every year. We recognise that one of the objections we could face to this bill would be unnecessary bureaucracy. We believe 3 years was a more reasonable time to allow systems to bed in, to do a proper review on that type of timescale. But as I say, to avoid unnecessary reporting, whereby we don't want departments spend so much time reporting on what they're doing, they're not doing what they should be.
You made a quip earlier in relation to, you said that OFMdFM had now agreed with you and that you were now cooperating with the department on the bill. Does that mean you weren't cooperating before?
Well, we were certainly engaging, but I suppose at that point in time, it was our intention to produce a bill, and at that time we hadn't been given support by OFMdFM, but we were certainly listening to each of the departments we consulted with as to any concerns they might have, and indeed the concerns of this committee, there have been redrafts which are taken into account. I remember particularly Mr Maskey's concern about the power in OFMdFM around pooled budgets, which is now being addressed in the redraft. So I say we have been working with other departments, but I think this is the first stage where first time we're working with common cause.
Just finally, in relation to clause 4, its current form, will you just clarify again what engagement you've had with the Department of Health and Social Services, and indeed also the Health and Social Care Board and the Public Health Authority, I suppose the Children and Young People's Strategic Partnership, to name just 4?
Sure. In terms of the Department of Health, say we've previously written to the Minister who gave the response I outlined before. We then sought a further a meeting and met with a senior official from within the department. I suppose I'll accept that it's maybe been remiss that we haven't as yet met with the Health and Social Care Board. But that is something we tend to take forward now in conjunction with OFMdFM officials to get, I suppose, detailed feedback from them, particularly on Clause 4. In terms of the children and young people strategic...
Well, just on that, given that you're putting a clause in, would it not be normally good practice to consult those bodies before you put the actual clause in place?
Except that I suppose I'll confess to maybe some inexperience. I thought in meeting the Department of Health and seeking their engagement, if they felt the board was required to be at that meeting, would have done so. But I appreciate now, I suppose, in learning through the process of this bill, I suppose the level of arm's length of the Health and Social Care Board, that it should have been.
I think that weakens some of your arguments.
Well, I wouldn't say it weakens the arguments, but I agree it's remiss of the bill, and in terms of getting the bill right, it's something we need to take forward and intend to take forward. But I'll hold my hands up to that.
That's all. Just the other bodies, have you met them?
The other body, you mentioned the CYPSP, and we've met with them on a number of occasions, either specifically around this bill or engagement through the All-Party Group for Children and Young People. As I say, a lot of this is based on evidence in terms of the work of Anne Godfrey, formerly of the CYPSP, and who was integral in establishing the CYPSP, but also evidence we've received from the CYPSP.
And the Health and Social Care Board and the Public Health Authority, who already have an extremely heavy workload. It's not our bailiwick, I understand, but obviously we're responsible for the bill, Chair. So, given the amount of duplication and all the rest of it, and given one of the aims of the Stormont House Agreement is to reduce the public sector, what do you have to say about increasing bureaucracy?
Well, I mean, the purpose of this bill is to reduce duplication.
I don't see it any place in it so far, I have to say.
Well, I'll give you an example.
I'll
give you an example of where duplication has taken place and where I would see this bill through cooperative work and reducing duplication. We currently have both health and education doing parallel planning for children and young people, either with special education needs, disabilities or other supports required throughout their education. The NICI report on transitions highlighted this parallel planning, the duplication of work, but also the impact that was having on a young person. Young people often with special education needs or autism, for example, in particular, find transitions to, in this specifics of this report, very challenging, very traumatic, very stressful. Two departments separately planning for such a transition from child to adult services within each of their departments at different stages, different times and separately, is both duplicating their work but also increasing, because potentially they decide transition to adult services at different stages. So it means for the young person having to go through different transitions at different times, increasing, as I say, stress and trauma.
I mean, I accept your argument on that, but do you not think that the bill, as it's laid out presently, is ambiguous in relation to that? And in fact, if that's the aim, and it decreases bureaucracy and decreases workloads generally, and there's a better outcome for the public at the end of the day, which is the aim, I'm sure, of the bill, would you not agree with me that it would be better, rather than being ambiguous on the issues, of having that clearly stated within the legislation?
Certainly, if in the explanatory and financial memorandum it is explicitly stated, I'm not sure it's required in the legislation to state it. I'm not sure what purpose it would have, but if we look at research in the Republic of Ireland, 2006, what was the report called? Sorry, 2011. The research in the Republic of Ireland actually says one of the most direct outcomes of integrated working and cooperation is actually the benefits to the staff. Now, certainly the purpose of the bill and the purpose of cooperative working isn't to necessarily benefit the agencies, but in benefiting the staff in terms of better working and indeed better performance from their working. Ultimately, a consequence is better outcomes for children.
Well, I'm sure you don't want to finally, put something on the table that will increase lawyers, a paradise for lawyers.
No, certainly not, and that's not the intention. Ultimately, it's to be a spur to drive cooperation. If we look across the regions, England brought in a statutory duty to cooperate in 2004. They, in 2011, I think I'm right in saying, it widened the scope of the cooperation required in bringing in schools, and in 2014 added it into in the special education needs legislation a duty to cooperate. Scotland equally have followed suit in their Children and Young People Act, as it is now, 2014. So the evidence is there that not only does it improve integrated working, but as I say, as I will share with committee, the evidence is there that it actually improves the use of resources. I don't want to say it saves money, because saving money suggests that we'll spend less money on children, but what it does do is more money can be spent on the frontline services delivering to children than on bureaucracy. So all the evidence, whilst I appreciate your concerns, all the evidence suggests that cooperative working has taken place, that it's actually reduced administrative burden, and again, they're equally the evidence around pooled budgets. Integrated services combined with pooled budgets is probably the most efficient way that, in practice, of delivering these sorts of services.
I have to say you haven't decreased my concerns at this moment in time, but that's not to say that I couldn't change my mind on it. Thank you, Chair.
Can I pick up on a point there, Stephen? As you say, like the genesis of this is the Children's Act of 2004, which basically created a framework, as you're trying to create a framework, which basically says you have to do this. This is a statutory duty. I mean, as I understand it, in around 2010, a lot of those provisions were scaled back in England and Wales, and actually the introduction of flexibility was seen to be a better way to deliver. So are you actually swimming against the current tide?
No, I disagree. What happened in England was the statutory duty kick-started cooperative working. Subsequently, the requirement, the statutory duty remains in England. I think it's important to note. The requirement to have trusts, extra bodies, which this bill does not propose, was withdrawn. But however, the children's trusts, which were those extra bodies, in the majority of cases remained on a voluntary basis. They weren't required, but they were retained. And indeed, the children's planning, that was again a statutory duty, which became voluntary, largely maintained. So the work that the legislation in England had kick-started continued, but it was the legislation that kick-started. But as I say, the one thing they haven't done in repealing the requirement for the Children's Trust, which this bill doesn't propose, and the requirement for planning, children's planning, in doing so, they did not repeal the statutory duty. As I say, much of the work that was kick-started by the legislation continues.
Your bill is predicated on achieving 6 specified outcomes, which are defined in the bill, and are the same specified outcomes that are in the Children and Young People strategy that we have, which runs 2006 to 16. The department, I believe, will soon consider the strategy post 2016.
Yeah.
What if they change the outcomes?
Well, this is the advantage of us working hand in hand with the department. If those outcomes, if the OFMdFM is minded to change those outcomes in the future strategy, they can be amendments we can bring forward jointly at consideration stage. But
what if it happens post this bill becoming law?
Well, then there is the outcomes can be changed by order. But as I say, if we're working in collaboration, we both know the same direction of travel, we're working together, then that as a process can be done. But I wouldn't envisage substantial change to those outcomes. I think the mood has been more around clarification as to what they mean, rather than major changes to what the outcome should be.
Just one thing on the point that you were talking about, swimming against the tide of the legislation. Last year in England, they introduced the Children and Families Act, which also introduced or reintroduced a more a stronger statutory duty to cooperate when it comes to special educational needs. And also just to flag up what Stephen had said as well with the Children and Young People's Act in Scotland, which was introduced last year. They, again, as I say, have brought in a very strong statutory duty to cooperate.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. As Stevie alluded to earlier, I spoke at the launch event and gave my support for the principles of the bill, not least because an Alliance Assembly manifesto commitment was to support legislation to improve cooperation between departments, to include a statutory duty to cooperate. So I welcome the bill and the principles that therein. I think cooperation, particularly in a multi-party executive, is absolutely vital. And I think, to speak to some of the concerns that Jimmy was raising, I think better coordinated resources should lead to more efficient resources and should hopefully lead to savings and avoid duplication as well. I think on the children's services issues and outcomes that you identify, it's particularly important. And also think in relation to building a shared future in a united community in Northern Ireland, cooperation is vital as well. Indeed, the last presentation and evidence session that we heard from today, I think, is a good example of why cooperation is vital, in that you have OFMdFM as a government department setting targets for other departments to deliver without any great allocation of resources or pulling of budgets, and then delivery against some of those targets is invariably very slow or non-existent. So, and I think that can be transferred to a lot of the issues relating to children and young people as well. Can I ask just two questions then? Is there any reason why for the focus in relation to children's services and not a general statutory duty to cooperate across departments? And having experienced, I should say, I also welcome the particular aspects of the bill in relation to review and report and enabling the pooling of budgets. This committee has pretty stark experience of OFMdFM's non-adherence to requirements to report on some of the issues that you mentioned in terms of child poverty, for example. So my second question would be, how much of an improvement do you think a statutory duty in relation to those issues is going to be on these issues?
I suppose your first question, why not a general duty? I think the evidence and research provided by the children's sector for this was key. I mean, of course, we want working across our departments. This might be the bridge to that, on wider issues. But it was, I suppose, the evidence was coming from the children's sector, the drive was coming from the children's sector. The creation of the CYPSP had been a first step in this direction. So in terms of taking forward something that I thought, as an individual, as a member of a single party as well, particularly, I thought this was achievable. I would need that outside support. And as I say, I think it was key the evidence was there. So that's where the drive from, that's where the evidence was from. And I suppose, to be perfectly honest, it's where a lot of my own passion's from. The second question, in terms of how much this will improve, I think we have seen a number of attempts to improve cooperation in terms of children's services. I think the Children's Champion was one example, but again, that was relying on an individual and putting a lot of responsibility on an individual within each department to act as children's champions. We seen the all-party group, the ministerial subgroup for children and young people, but it didn't meet. The evidence was that it was officials rather than ministers meeting on many occasions. Which in itself was progress, but then it wasn't meeting, and it to some extent fell by the wayside. And now we see delivering social change again as a step to making that happen. I suppose the evidence is that legislation in England worked. As I say, it kick-started that integrated working, that cooperative working, and as I say, to the extent where Scotland have decided to follow suit, even though the evidence was that there was quite a lot of good integrated working in Scotland, they still felt that it could be improved with legislation. So I think legislation does make a difference, and indeed even with our discussions with officials from the various departments, a number of officials say if this becomes our duty, our core to what we do, we will do it, because it will become our job to do it. So it goes from being a nice thing to do, something that as I say, there is good practice. It's about making that good practice systemic. At the minute, good practice relies on individuals driving it forward, individuals with the foresight, almost going against what their core duties are, and going outside their remit to make cooperation happen. It then becomes something that they're required to do, and I think provides the framework for those who want to cooperate, and provides a better framework for them to do so. And for those who are reluctant to cooperate, it makes it a requirement and gives them the shove that they may need to start working in a different way. And in times of kind of limited resources, we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them, just because it's the way we've always done them. And that has been some of the feedback I've got. It's just not how we do things. Well, I would say the way we do things isn't working. There's ample evidence from the Children's Commissioner, the Children's Law Centre, showing where a lack of cooperation is failing children, and I don't think that can be continued.
In closing, I agree. I think there's a raft of issues where we need to see greater cooperation, and perhaps that duty will give people, as in addition to a push, the freedom and the culture that they need to enhance that cooperation as well. So look forward to working with you on the bill. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. The two Alexes are next. Alex M. first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Stephen, Ross. Apologies, I had to go and get my computer for the IT closed for the day. We obviously have a look at this, and our party's view is that we're very sympathetic to having to be able to support the bill, and certainly very keen to support the principles behind the bill around ensuring that there's maximum and full cooperation across all the departments, in this case in delivery of services for children. But a couple of probably causes of concern we do have, and I think you mentioned earlier on yourself there, you refer certainly to delivering social change, that we do see it as a very important delivery model, and I'd like to see much more definitive work done around, even say, for example, the pooling of resources, how you do that, and what does that actually mean, and can we get a budget line for that. I think a big point of concern that we would have would be around Clause 4, actually, which, I just keep harking back to the review of public administration a number of years ago, great hopes of reducing bureaucracy and all the rest of that. We haven't even begun to look at the whole world of quangos, and in fact have considerably increased since 1998. So that to me is a reverse of where we should be going into, and Clause 4 would certainly appear to give a lot of authority to an arm's length body there at the moment, and that would be something that would give me big concern, to be very honest with you, and it would be a circle I would want to have squared ultimately, because for me what this is doing, if you read the clause itself, it's in some quite detail, it actually continually, increasingly gives more authority, if you like, to the Health Social Care Board to start determining what has to be done, and I think that takes away from the authority of departments. So agreeing absolutely with the principle of ensuring cooperation, we'd want to support the bill which will actually put requirements on people to do that. But I would want to see that stopping short of actually giving somebody else, particularly in this case an arm's length body, which takes it away from democratic accountability as opposed to increasing democratic accountability. So I would wonder if you can address any of those concerns, because I say my view would be that given the authority to an arm's length body, and increasingly given that increasing the authority on an ongoing basis, where they can actually then start to determine and moderate and modify plans and stuff like that, basically dictate the department. So for me that takes it out of democratic control. So that's a big cause of concern to myself and to my party, and that would be, I suppose, the main thing. But a general comment around even the requirement to cooperate. So this bill is designed to give a requirement to cooperate. It doesn't actually require anybody to do anything differently or anything better. So in a way you could be asking yourself, well, what is the point? Because you will require people to cooperate. I could go and take a lot of boxes by saying I'm cooperating, but it made me do anything better, if you know what I mean. So can you address that, what appears to be a deficit?
Okay, I suppose to take the issue about Clause 4 and the power given the Health and Social Care Board, we did look at a number of options. as I say, the purpose of Clause 4 was to strengthen the work of the CYPSB, taking into account what had been said about the requirement for goodwill and trying to put the cooperative working that was taking place where goodwill existed, trying to put it in a statutory footing, move it from good practice, as I say, to the kind of systemic practice. We looked at a number of ways how we do that. One of the things we looked at doing was actually putting a CYPSB. We couldn't refer to it. It would have been much easier to refer to it in the bill, but it doesn't exist in a statutory footing. It's, I suppose, a body within in health. So what we then put was well, we could talk about relevant public bodies. You have to list those, and that seemed like a good starting point. It's probably where the most concern has been raised with us around the bill, and we are willing to work with others to see if there's a better way of putting that statutory duty on cooperative working on agencies. But I would have to say the concern that it gives too much power to the Health and Social Care Board. My understanding of the bill and my reading of the bill, and certainly my intention with the bill, is that the reporting up goes through the Health and Social Care Board. So each of these agencies will have to report on how they're cooperating. It doesn't, to me, give the Health and Social Care Board any power or dominion over them other than the requirement that they report through the Health and Social Care Board and how they're cooperating. Outside of that, the Health and Social Care Board can't direct them and wouldn't give the board the power to do so. I would also say that the duty is reciprocal. It's a duty for those agencies to cooperate with each other, so it is a reciprocal duty. As I say, what goes through the board is the reporting. And it would be the board that would compile the report. The board also produces a children's services plan, but that's currently the case, so that's not given any additional power. That's simply replicating what's already in the children's order.
But, sorry, Chairman, but would you not? I mean, it may be just the way it's written, but if you then say if the board then feels that it wants to a change or up to the whole or part of the services plan needs to be changed, the only requirement on the board here, according to what I read, is to go out for consultation.
Mm-hmm.
It indicates to me there they could actually change the services plan. That's what I would read out of that, and that's where again will give me a bit of cause for concern. So that may just need to be clarified or maybe redrafted.
I'll certainly take a look at that. I think I'm right in saying, in terms of how the children's plan is produced and drafted, it doesn't change that. The bill as proposed. The only extra requirement is in the review and reporting of it, that the agencies, well, they have to cooperate in the delivery of it, and they have to cooperate in terms of production of that report. So I don't believe it gives the board any additional powers in that regard, but I will double check that and come back to the committee. If you make it.
Sorry, just to flag up, I mean, a lot of what is being proposed in Clause 4 is already in legislation, and it is a modification to take into account the existence of the CYPSP, and essentially what we were saying was, well, because we can't put it into statute, well, we could have, but because it doesn't exist in law, we said, well, put all the public bodies who are in it down and say, cooperate together to produce the plan. And much of that good work is taking place at the moment anyway, so I don't think this clause will radically change an awful lot of the planning process, which is good at the moment, but the delivery perhaps it does need improved.
I should say also, when we met with the Department of Health, now it was an earlier draft of the bill, they did raise concerns about Clause 4 as it is now. They said that there may be other ways of doing what we're trying to do, and they would come back to us with alternative proposals. They haven't as yet done that, but if they, in future engagement with them, if they can and are willing to do so, we'd certainly be happy to look at all our vehicles. I suppose I should be very clear, this bill is the best bill that, you know, with our legislative team we could make it, but now I'm working with OFMdFM and indeed other statutory departments and agencies, if we can improve this bill at further stages, assuming pass the second stage in the Assembly, we're keen to do that.
And have any of the other departments, like, because I mean, as I read that across there, that would affect a number of departments. That's the whole purpose of the bill in the first place. So you've referred to OFMdFM and Health Department. Have any of the other departments engaged with you on this?
Yes, well, the Department for Agriculture and indeed the Minister for Agriculture has indicated our support for the statutory duty. We had a very positive engagement with one of her officials, and subsequently in written answer, the Minister put on record her support for it. I mentioned the Education Minister has sort of stated about being relaxed about the idea of a statutory duty, so he certainly didn't say he was supportive, but he was clear in that he would, if it was the House's will, I think I'm quoting him and saying he would not stand in the way or seek to stand in the way.
Well, if it was the will of the House, he wouldn't have much choice. But
well, yeah, his words, not mine. But
any minister. But I'm talking about specifically in relation to Clause 4, because everybody is obviously, I think, quite satisfied. I'm certainly satisfied that in principle everybody would like to endorse what you're doing here. But
say contacted each department, each minister seeking a meeting. Some came back and others didn't. So I took the ones who didn't come back as certainly having no concerns at that point. I suspect now that we have a bill, and particularly if it goes past the second stage, other departments might take more of an interest. But you know, as I spoke as best I can about the engagement with the departments who've chosen to engage at this point.
thank you.
Okay. Alexei?
Well, first of all, as at the launch on Monday, to acknowledge the work of you, both of you, and the children's sector in getting this piece of legislation at this point in time. Mindful that there's little more than 40 sitting weeks between now and Purda. So, but on the other hand, this is the time when bills from across government tend to get accelerated. But you can anticipate that if legislation that is meant to be taken forward as part of Stormont House is taken forward, is going to be a very packed, even more packed legislative programme in those 40 or 45 weeks. So could I also recognise that more and more government is putting into law requirements for various public bodies to either cooperate or have regard for one another. If you look at the local government legislation, that's a stream that runs through the local government legislation in anticipation of the new councils going live in May. Obligations on council, government departments and other bodies to have regard to one another. I think it might actually go a bit further than that, but I can't recall at the moment. I also hope that your bill will, in the context of the reduction in number of departments, get an added impetus so that in the reduction in number of departments, you take the opportunity to tighten up how departments and others do their business, because there is a danger that bigger departments, things could get lost, things could fall between the cracks, and this could be remedied in relation to children by the duty to cooperate. And it may also be a catalyst, your bill, that in the consideration of what departments should look like, that children are named in a ministerial portfolio, a full ministerial portfolio in terms of children's responsibilities. And I say all of that because, as I said at the event on Monday, the scale of childhood poverty in real and absolute, in relative and absolute terms that we face by 2020 necessitates something like this as one of many interventions to mitigate what we are now about to face, based upon OFMdFM's own commissioned IFS research. I could have welcomed the fact that OFMdFM and DARD are showing some authority by backing this. But my question, it's the only question, is when OFMdFM say since Monday that they are going to work with you on this, is that have you met with officials or met with at political level? And what does that actually mean does it mean that they're going to apply resource and staff to help you with it? And are they saying that it is their ambition, as your ambition, to get this legislation passed in this mandate? And has there been political approval as opposed to officials go away and talk to Stephen Agnew about this? Is it all that it should be, as opposed to, I don't want to say warm phrases, but is it all that it should be?
I'm certainly very encouraged. The meeting on Monday was included officials and ministers, and indeed special advisors, and indeed the junior ministers indicated their support for the principles of the bill. I'm always keen to make the point it is the principles. I think in terms of working together, what that looks like, how I understand it from the meetings, and obviously after me you'll hear from officials, how I understand that is that we take forward joint meetings with stakeholders. We hear feedback on the aspects of the bill, and where there are concerns, we seek to bring forward joint amendment. Now, I know I anticipate how some of these things work. Some of the amendments that might come forward might not be joint amendments, but the purpose of the joint meetings is actually to work in tandem and as work as possible. As we've seen with Lord Morrow's bill, there may be amendments that we bring forward that OFMdFM will not support. There may be OFMdFM amendments that I'll not support, or indeed Department of Health or whoever it might be, Minister of Health. But I think as well what OFMdFM bring to the table that we cannot do is where we have got common cause and amendments is bring in expertise and drafting services that we wouldn't have access to. And I'm certainly very encouraged by that. But certainly we've including Monday, we've had 2 meetings already, and I certainly see a willingness to be positive and support in terms of taking this forward. And as I say, where concerns have been raised by members here and indeed by officials, looking at addressing them together rather than separately.
Good. Okay. I think we have just one question of clarification. It's
just a very small point, Stephen, and I'm sure you didn't mean it in a way that could be taken up. Whenever you were Mr. Maskey, you said that in relation to clause 4, that this was the best we could do with our legislative team. Sure, you didn't mean that the Northern Ireland Assembly has
no.
Other assemblies have better.
No. Our legislative team, as in the Green Party.
Oh, in the Green Party.
Put that on record.
I just wanted to clarify that.
And I should put on record.
Officials just don't have the right to come back. And,
No, and I should put on record our absolute thanks and indebtedness to the Bill's office within the Assembly for the work they have done. Okay. The Bill wouldn't be here without them.
Okay, well, listen, Ross and Stephen, thank you very much. Could I just ask, as we're going to be scrutinising this, that if there are amendments and there are developments in terms of your liaison, not least with OFMdFM, that you keep us abreast in a timely manner?
Absolutely. I fully intend
to. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, members, finally, for today's session, we have now basically reaction from officials from the department. Live reaction, yes, it's like Sky Sports.
You're back.
So you'll have noticed June Wilkinson and Margaret Rose McNaughton were listening in to the previous session.
Yes.
Sorry for the late time of afternoon, Margaret Rose, but that's where we are. Could I just ask you, do you want to make any comments, or are you just happy to go straight to questions?
Well, I mean, I have a few comments to make just generally on our views on the bill, if the committee would like to hear those in the first instance. I mean, some of the members have already referred to some of the concerns that we would have. From the outset, I would say, absolutely we agree in principle, and the information we have back from departments to date would suggest that, yes, the duty to cooperate is something that people would certainly would welcome. It's how it's done, and it's ensuring that the bureaucratic process around reporting is as minimal as possible. We in OFMdFM will be working very closely, as Stephen said, with him and with the stakeholders from now on, providing, of course, the bill goes through on the 26th of January at second reading. And we do welcome it. But when junior ministers met this week with Stephen, they did offer their support, for the general principles of the bill. They raised the concerns, and they, setting aside the drafting issues with the bill and the need to ensure that the bill works as a matter of law, and that any legal problems are ironed out with the bill. And again, Stephen alluded to some of those around the need for Clause 4 and whether it could be taken forward through other forms of subordinate legislation. But the ministers did, signal that they wanted to see the bill improved to ensure that it would meet its own objectives, and that this may require significant amendments. So I think we would be, flagging up at this stage that there are likely to be significant amendments, and those amendments would probably, come along around the whole issue. If we look at what the bill is about, and it's really about the planning and the implementation and monitoring of children's services, and if everybody is clear on the policy intent that it's for people and public services to cooperate in planning and implementing and monitoring, then I think we have a good starting point. We probably will want to be putting forward amendments that would suggest a restructuring of the bill in that format. These are just our initial thoughts at this stage. We have quite a lot of work to do with departments, with stakeholders, with yourselves, and then of course it's subject to our ministers are agreeing all of this as well. So I'll just put the caveat in that. We do have concerns around Clause 4. Certainly our reading of the bill would suggest that it does place substantial powers on the Health and Social Care Board. We're a bit anxious as well that there hasn't been that much consultation with the Health and Social Care Board, but yet we have a bill that potentially would provide or give them a lot of power over other departments, and indeed in the over the executive. So there is a concern there, I think, around the democratic accountability of the executive and of the ministers. But again, that sounds a bit negative, I know, but setting those things aside, while we generally support the principles in the bill, there will be some fairly substantial amendments that we will want to bring forward.
Okay, that's very useful, thank you. Ms Ragnar, you heard say twice at least that on Monday he and you as a department have found common cause. Now, notwithstanding the caveats which we understand that you've just detailed, can you endorse that language? Have you as a department found common cause, or do you need to qualify that statement?
Well, I think we would certainly, I think every department has said that yes, of course they would welcome the intention that all departments will work closely together. In terms of common cause, well, yes, there are probably areas where departments know themselves that we could be working much better together, much closer together. I think the concern is, how do we do it, and whatever legislation we put in place, will we be sure that it actually does make a difference to the children? I think that's the important part in all of this. Whatever bill we bring forward, it actually has to do what the policy intention is. As it stands at the minute, we don't think that the way this bill is written, that it actually does that for us.
And would that be a shared concern, as that expressed by Mr Maskey, that you can cooperate all day without actually achieving anything?
That's right. That would be exactly right. And actually, when you look at the reporting procedures, they're the one bit as well that gives us a bit of concern. There's nothing in there to say, to be specific about what we're reporting on. Where are the actions? Where are the targets? Or, is this just another reporting format that we go through anyhow for UNCRC and for child poverty? In any amendments we would want to bring forward, we would want to be very clear that if there's another reporting structure brought in, put in its place, that we can bring in the other reporting that we are already doing, so we have them all together.
So there's a danger, and not put it any more higher than that this is more guaranteed input without guaranteed output and outcomes.
Okay. There's that concern, yes.
Could you clarify the mystery, minor mystery? Had the department seen this bill, which was presented on the 8th of December to the Assembly, before it was presented to the Assembly?
We saw it about the very end of November, right. And then we wrote out to departments unfit of the draft at that stage to advise them that it was likely to be brought forward.
Jimmy Spratt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Margaret Rose. You'll have heard me question in relation to, and I do have concerns around the increase in bureaucracy and the duplication in reporting. I mean, given that we're going into a period now where we're trying to have better outcomes at the end of the day, and money's going to the cold face, if you like, as opposed to creating another quango or another body or another whatever, because sometimes the answer to everything is a new quango. I know that some parties are very keen on that, but certainly we're not. We want to see them reduced dramatically. So what's the views in relation to the very real possibilities of increasing bureaucracy and duplication?
Well, I think what we would be hoping to do would be to bring forward an amendment that would suggest that, you know, if the board, if this sits still with the board in terms of developing the plan, that the board would provide a monitoring report that could come to perhaps OFMdFM, who would add any further analysis to it and then forward it to the executive. But in that monitoring, I mean, that we would try and incorporate the other monitoring or gathering of information that we're doing around child poverty, that we're doing around UNCRC. So, you know, bring them all together. If the board, you know, if the strategic objectives or the outcomes as are already set within this bill, if they remain the same, well, we're already reporting on all of those outcomes, or the progress being made on those outcomes. And we're already reporting, as I said, on the UNCRC. So we need to try and, our amendments I would hope would try to bring all of those together, rather than, you know, have another layer of reporting that we all have to do.
Which is actually duplication. So you're saying you're concerned about.
Well, we would hope to remove
duplication
by doing that. You know, that if we have it laid in the bill, whatever reporting structure is put in place, that it deals with certainly those three main areas, if we can do that.
And then in relation to clause 4, and has the Department of Health, you said some of the departments had responded, has the Department of Health responded? Are they concerned in relation to some of the issues around there, and in particular the Health and Social Care Board? Is there not a real danger, and you heard me also say, of creating another paradise for lawyers, and that would be seen or done in a way that would undermine the executive or executive departments?
I think yes, we would have a concern around that. I mean, certainly the DHSS response. I mean, they were a bit concerned. You know, if you placed, for example, the CYPSP on a statutory basis, what happens to all the non-statutory functions then that the CYPSP already carries out at the moment? I mean, do we lose that, or is there another organisation or within the board that has to carry out those? So, I mean, that's where there would be maybe the fear would be another, not quango, but another body within the board set up to take that forward. So there is a danger, I think, that we could end up with, you know, if ministers can't prioritise the services or the issues that they want to take forward, and if the board is doing that for them in terms of their plan, that then, yes, lawyers can judicially review whatever, whatever aspects that people are not content with. Do you want to say a wee bit on that, June?
I was just going to say that really across the departments, their concerns were that the drafting was very general, and we would seek to make it more specific, that we would have targeted outcomes that will achieve and make a difference. That was very key in it. At the minute, the outcomes aren't specific enough. Departments had a concern about the absoluteness of duties, and again, we would want to achieve cooperation in a way that actually makes a difference. So that would be very relevant there, without increasing bureaucracy, but increasing effectiveness. And that's the challenge for us.
Is there any opportunities to increase the already reporting structures or collaboration on issues between departments, rather than a legislative process like this? is there not an opportunity to strengthen it in terms of including children and young people? Because I think we're all agreed on the principles, all right. But certainly in its present format, I certainly would have very serious concerns.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do think that as we go through the process and as we talk to departments and go through each of the clauses with them, that would be one of the issues that we would want to raise. What are the other ways of doing what we want to do without actually having to take it forward through specific legislation?
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. It's helpful to hear about the concerns that you have. I don't think any of them sound insurmountable, but it is helpful to hear what they are. How do you see the bill assisting the children and young people's strategy, for example? Or how do you see it impacting on children and young people's strategy?
You want to take?
I think the bill will very much strengthen the new children and young people strategy, and as we take forward the old one to its conclusion. The key to the strategy is cross-departmental work, and so something that legislatively strengthens that would be very effective, and I would want to make sure that as we consult on the strategy and develop it with departments in the sector, that that's included.
Chair, I would like to think so as well. I have a degree of sympathy for OFMdFM Children and Young People's Unit at times, given the wide range of issues that particular area covers and the amount of departments that you need to work together to report back to you to coordinate on that issue. So I would genuinely hope that would be the case as well. But this morning, Chair, is one good example of departments working together. The Department of Health, Public Health Agency pools funds with DRD to create the Active Schools Travel programme. And we know the cost of obesity, childhood obesity in Northern Ireland is huge. So I think that's a good example where departments come together, cooperate, pool funds in a way that hopefully is a positive use of resources and a preventative spend as well. So there's other issues as well. Department of Employment and Learning creating the NEETS Youth Forum and the NEETS strategy as well. So I would like to think that this is an enhancement when those concerns have been addressed that will help the executive to work together. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. 3 quick fire to finish, if I may. It may be too early to be asking this question. Any assessment of the cost to your department in terms of funding and resource if this goes through?
Well, I mean, no. That was one of their other concerns. We need to find the resource.
But that's okay, that's down the road. It talks about pooled resources. Let's say that the bill becomes law within the financial year 15-16. What would you put in? What would a reasonable budget be to a pooled resource?
Well, at this stage, I think the bill just enables departments to pool resources. There's no mandatory pooling of resources at this point within the bill, and I don't think we would be suggesting that it would become a mandatory requirement. But in terms of, I think how it works at the moment in England is where departments are currently working on particular programmes or issues.
Okay.
Each would decide themselves what.
I'm just going to say my one goal at the moment it's that they may pool resources once they identify the reason for doing that. My goal with the bill would be to ensure that there's correct management, audit and accountability within that clause within the bill, so that if departments choose to go down that route, it's done effectively.
Okay. What I'm hearing is you're saying if this became law, you would consider pooling resources, but you'd convince me on a case-by-case basis that it makes good sense.
That's probably it, yes.
Chris,
yeah, just one quick supplementary, Chair. I would hope that would be positive as well. Are there instances where you have programmes or targets set that there is money somewhere else that if you could get your hands on it would allow you to deliver a very good programme, but for bureaucratic reasons it's not possible to access the funds, even though they're very similar in terms of the outcomes they seek to achieve, that this might help to overcome?
I think delivering social change has already shown that there is the opportunity to move money around, and we've quite effectively done that. A number of other initiatives within OFMdFM is moving money to other departments to help ensure that the funding is where it can be delivered. So on an informal basis, that exists.
Is really important. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one.
And finally, do you know, is it the intention of the junior ministers to respond to the second stage?
Sorry,
Is it the intention of the junior ministers to respond to the second stage?
yes. Oh, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
That's on the 26th. Yes.
June, Margaret Rose, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And members, thank you for sticking with us here. If the bill does pass second stage, it is most likely that we will be the scrutiny committee for committee stage, and we'll need to invite evidence from stakeholders. We'll need a draft public notice, and we should have one available for consideration at next week's meeting. So the question is, are members content to ask Assembly Research to draw up a list of stakeholders who we will then have to contact if we are doing the committee stage of the bill?
How does that fit in with our current inquiry?
With difficulty. We have, well, when I say our inquiry is our inquiry, and I would suggest to the membership it takes precedence.
Yeah.
I would have thought inevitably if the second stage passes and it comes to us, we will ask for an extension on the minimum period.
We would have to, because
we won't do it.
So,
Can I just make one suggestion that you probably well know yourself? Children in Northern Ireland is an umbrella organisation that has done a significant amount of work in this area, and they will be able to coordinate or assist with coordination of any evidence as well if there is a need to streamline that process. Just a suggestion.
Okay, no, appreciate that. And I would suggest that we go long, because I would rather that we completed ahead of our targeted finish date than find that we're putting ourselves under unnecessary pressure. So I can't see us doing it in the statutory minimum, and I think we should be generous in terms of the time we allow ourselves. And yes, the TBOC inquiry has to be our priority. So members, forward work programme, in the absence of any comment on what is a very busy programme, can I ask, is there any other business? And if not, may I say we adjourn until Wednesday the 21st at 2 p.m. We return to our mother planet of room 30. Meeting adjourned.
not get crash into another meeting now.
We get treated today.
As the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Senate Chamber, programme signed. This is